today I want to talk about this portfolio website, which I've built in about a week's worth of effort using a bunch of different AI tools and integrations. So this website itself, it's a single page application which shows off a bit of a demonstration of myself and my career up to this point. I've been a software engineer for 8 years, and I wanted to encapsulate all of the tools I've worked with and technologies I've used, and also talk about a bit of like each of the places I've worked, because I've got a fairly diverse skill set and exposure to different industries within software. And this single page application should just be a quick reflection of like all of those skills, easy to navigate and fairly intuitive to just kind of scroll through. And yeah, as we can see, it's fairly lightweight, a little bit of scrolling, pretty simple. And yeah, it was pretty easy to actually build. The website itself, it doesn't really have any backend requirements, so most of the implementation is just using Vue and Three.js, which is a library for the 2D and 3D rendering, which is how I got this 3D model to work inside the scene. And it was fairly intuitive to actually build. So let me get into, I guess, not the biggest challenge, but the thing that this whole portfolio kind of is built around, which is this 3D model scene. So how did I do this? We can take a look at Claude's desktop application here, and you can see we've got these connectors. So in Claude, in the desktop app, the connectors are basically just a way for your Claude agents to integrate with other tools and applications that live on your PC, for instance. So here we can see we've got like Spotify connectors, GitHub, etc. Now specifically for this website itself, I was using what's called the Blender connector and also a little bit of Canva, because yeah, while building out this portfolio website, I did actually also focus on updating my resume, and that's kind of where Canva came in. But yeah, focusing more on the Blender side of things, I created a Blender scene for myself, which I'm not like a 3D, like I work in games, or have worked in games, but I'm not proficient in 3D skills, right? So like my Blender skills, I know how to navigate the scene, but I don't know how to build things, rig things, all the stuff that's required of like a proper 3D artist. I'm not really versed in. So as we can see here, this is a Blender scene that's kind of been jerry-rigged and thrown into this Three.js integration, and this scene itself, I kind of put together, but then I asked Claude to actually construct the scene. And the models themselves, I used this tool called Meshy, which is an online tool you can use, and it's just got a subscription fee of like $10 or $20 a month. So I subscribed this month for Meshy because I wanted to create that kind of desk scene. So we can see here this 3D or this 2D picture of me sitting at a desk. I kind of spent some time working with the Meshy agent to construct, I guess, the vision of what I wanted the website to look like in this 2D view first, and then I got Meshy to generate like a bunch of assets. The props were easy to do, but I wanted to generate like the ultimate end goal for this portfolio website was to have a little 3D character that looks enough like me, and the best way to do it was using a cartoony art style, because as we can see here, I took like a selfie of myself where I was able to generate the 2D asset of myself, and the face, it looks quite similar. It looks similar enough where it's not uncanny in this 2D picture here. This one I think was the closest representation of what I look like. The color, the hair color, the widow's peaks, the eyes maybe, but translating this into like a 3D thing that I can then rig and animate was the challenge, right? So the initial models from Meshy looked enough like myself, but didn't have like that 2D perspective. So they were still a bit uncanny, and I thought, this looks a bit weird. So what I ultimately wanted to do was change the art style to something closer to this, which is more cartoony, so you don't really notice the flaws. It's less uncanny, and it can just kind of look like me, roughly. And I can kind of get away with that as my avatar on the website. One of the challenges I had was initially I was modeling this as like a T-pose, so it's easy to rig and then animate it subsequently. However, I noticed like whatever I was rigging, I experimented with a few other online tools to get the rigging in animations done, but I just wanted him to be sitting at the table idly. So the idle animation of him sitting at a table was really hard to do because once I'd rig it and pull it into Blender, like the Blender equivalent would just be horrible. So what I ended up deciding to do was just get a static model of a character just sitting down, and then I would ultimately just get another static model of just the head, overlay the head on top of the neck, and then I can just rotate the head to look at the mouse. As we can see here, there's a little bit of rotation so the character looks at the mouse. Now, what I did want is to be able to animate the eyes and the eyebrows, and maybe have a little bit of emotion on the face, but that's alright. Maybe that'll come in a future pass. And I basically just had to do a bit of back and forth corrections with the AI. Meshy's AI, it's a bit unintuitive. Like I would send another, this horrible screenshot of myself, but I'd send another screenshot through and try to get it to generate something, and it would just, I don't know, give me this Frankenstein looking guy, and I'm like, well, that's not me at all. That's missing the mark. So I would ultimately just go with something that looked close enough. And then using the Blender connectors and the Claude desktop agent, because the Claude CLI, I couldn't get it working with like the Blender connectors. So I had to use the actual Claude desktop for this with the connector capabilities, put the head in the scene and kind of get it working so that if I was to like rotate the head, it would look at the mouse position without being uncanny or like having any kind of clipping on the neck or any of that kind of stuff. The table and chairs, the Blender connector and Claude Opus 4.8 was able to kind of set the scene up loosely enough, and then I just went in and kind of moved things around with my limited Blender expertise, scaled things up a bit to make the scene look a bit more clean. And then, yeah, basically just exported that and imported it directly into my project implementation, which is using Vue.js and the Three.js package or framework to get the render engine working to be able to render out the 3D environment. There are some issues, however, with lighting, which are minor things. But yeah, you can see like on the mustache, there's this little orange bar on the mustache. So that's just a lighting issue, I believe, with Three.js. I really haven't done too much into that and to polish it up, but I could probably fix all these things later. And that was the big challenge, kind of solved using Blender connectors and Meshy and Three.js, which is probably the biggest technical complexity within this whole implementation. The rest is pretty standard, just there wasn't much state to track because it's a single page application with no backend requirements. I just have links to go to, external pages, whatever, connect some links to my GitHub. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the Vue.js requirements, really not much. The biggest challenge, like from a technical perspective, was getting that scrolling view to work and allow the shaders to smooth in a transition to the desk scene, which I think looks really cool now that I've got it working. And there was a bit of back and forth with Claude, but I pretty much just queued agent sessions to get most of this done. I might have done like a little bit of playing around with numbers and fades, but yeah, at this stage, like Opus 4.8 is pretty powerful. So the biggest, I guess, time sink for me personally was writing out these paragraphs, because for me, I'm a firm believer if it's something like your portfolio or a resume, like you really want to be writing that yourself, at least doing a first iteration of writing out those paragraphs, because you don't want it to sound like robotic, I guess. You want it to sound authentically you in how you would write or speak. So that's probably the biggest time sink for me, was writing out my work experience in a clean, concise way and arranging, I guess, my skills, expertise, figuring out which technologies and tools I've used. This was a bit of a pain to get working, just laying it out correctly. It's hard to get like Opus 4.8 to interpret your vision for what you want it to look like, and I think I still might end up playing around with the layout of this a little bit, to be honest, because it looks a little bit weird. I was kind of hoping it to be maybe an inverse pyramid looking thing where I can like categorize the different tools and stuff like AI tooling at the top or whatever, but yeah, it's not quite there. So I might spend a little bit more time playing around with the layout of this tool section. But yeah, fairly straightforward. The other time sink for me was the resume itself. So I did actually spend a bit of time cleaning up my resume and all of this was pretty much handwritten, but what is interesting is, again, with those connectors, I connected the Canva app so that I could get Claude 4.8 to proofread my resume and give me suggestions of like how to order my work experience. I wanted to basically trim the fat because previously my resume was 2 pages and I wanted to condense it all down into like one clean, concise resume. So Claude was good at actually helping out find out which pieces of the puzzle I didn't really need if I wanted to like trim things out of the resume and structure it cleanly. But pretty much, yeah, all of this wording I wrote myself and then got like Claude to give me suggestions on how I could improve it from a readability perspective to maybe capture readers and make sure they're not just, skimming through it all. And I think, yeah, it turned out quite well, which is nice. Yeah, that's pretty much everything. Not too much technical jargon for this specific implementation because really there wasn't much. It was pretty straightforward building this website. And yeah, if anyone has any questions on how to get the Claude connectors working or like Blender set up, if they want to build something similar, happy to help out. So yeah, see you later.